The gentleman is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I want to thank his work and the work of his committee. I want to thank Congresswoman Karen Bass. I served with her in the State Assembly from the works as we go forward. Today marks 1 month since George Floyd was tragically killed. As we all agree, Mr. Floyd, Pat Underwood, and countless others should be alive today. Republicans have listened closely to calls for justice, and we've responded proactively. Leading our response has been Senator Tim Scott and Congressman Pat Stauber. We could not ask for a better pair to work on this important issue. A black senator who has personally experienced racial discrimination, and a retired law enforcement officer who has been wounded on his job for more than 23 years with the state of Minnesota, who now serves in the House. Their thoughtful efforts have produced something that's too rare in this town, a bill that actually tries to solve a problem, not just score political points. It is truly a bipartisan plan with over 80% of the policies in the bill supported by Democrats. It builds on previous Republican-led civil rights efforts, such as in the majority when we did criminal justice reform, opportunity zones, and school choice. In fact, it could be on its way to becoming law today in a more sensible environment. It would pass on the merits with overwhelmingly bipartisan supports. But we don't live in sensible times. When I looked at George Floyd's brother in the eye and told him that George would not have died in vain, I meant it. To those on the other side of the aisle, I believe you meant it too, but there's questions that arise. Did you work in good faith across the aisle? Or did you choose to go it alone? Did you choose to make a point rather than make a difference? All while putting politics before people and slandering Republicans in the process. First, you dismissed the Justice Act as ineffective before one single word was read. I never once said that the Democrat bill was a non-starter, not once. I was asked at a press conference to name one thing that I oppose. I went back to the reporter and said, no, I will not. Because this is a moment in time the country expects us to rise to the occasion. I'm not going to point something that I disagree with because I believe we could get to the point together. I had hoped that on this floor we'd probably be debating amendments. Not one single amendment was allowed. Not one single amendment was allowed. I listened to the Democrats on the other side because they're in the position the Republicans are here in the minority. They were offered 20 amendments, but they felt they shouldn't go forward. Not to vote on the bill, but not even to debate it. Would it be too much to offer the minority one vote to do a bill together? Then you tried to diminish its author. One Senate Democrat who is white went so far as to say on the floor of the Senate that Senator Scott, a black Republican, was taking the token approach. I don't know if you've ever served with Tim. There's no one that has higher character than the man I know. I don't know what it's like to walk in other people's lives, but Tim is a good friend. He's told me the stories. Tim did not start working on this bill a month ago. He's been working on it his entire life, like others as well. Tim did not ask to do the bill on the Senate side with no input from the other side of the aisle. Tim offered amendments and others, but it can't even move the bill forward. Now you're defaming its supporters, saying, as Speaker Pelosi absurdly claims, that we are trying to get away with murder, the murder of George Floyd. She knows she should have apologized, but she doubled down on her remarks yesterday. That was a very sad state of affairs. Think for one moment, the Speaker of the House is second in line to the President of the United States. That job is too big for words so small, especially in this moment and in this opportunity. So much for meeting the moment and working together to solve a problem. We've reached a new low in this body, and it's not one that I wanted to be a part of. Democrats in the Senate had the opportunity to add 20 amendments to address their concerns about the Justice Act, but they chose to walk away. Meanwhile, in the House hasn't given the Republicans the opportunity to offer a single amendment on the floor. I've been in the position of being a majority leader. I understand you let a few make a decision, but I do not believe it's the will of the other side of the aisle to shut out voices on this side. I do not believe that you think you have all the answers or are afraid to even have a debate. When you know this is an issue that all of America on the streets are rising up and want to have a voice heard. I don't understand why anybody's afraid to have amendments. We didn't stop for participating even though we've been shut out. We've been to every hearing. We've been to every place. We want to make law. We don't want to make politics. I think our country deserves more. Worse yet, Democrats are now trying to distract from the party's failures in governing major American cities, complacent in the chaos and its consequences. While we stall serious reform, allies in the left-wing mob are engaging in looting, destruction, and violence, attacking people, property, and public monuments to American heroes. The latest incident, I guarantee you, will not be the last. It was in the city of Madison, Wisconsin, not a Republican stronghold, but a Democrat, for decades. There, our local officials stood by as a mob tore down several statues that are publicly owned and entirely unoffensive. The first statue they tore down was of Lady Forward, a symbol of progress in the women's suffrage movement. Next, they tore down a statue of Hans Christian Haig, an abolitionist who died fighting to end slavery during the Civil War. But it wasn't just statues they attacked that night. The mob also assaulted a sitting state senator, a self-described supporter of the protesters. This lawless and unjustified violence must be stopped. But their own Wisconsin lieutenant governor seemed too surprised by the attacks to do anything about them. Their fatal mistake is to assume that the Democrats will be safe because, as the lieutenant governor said, they're on the proper side. But here's the realities. Mobs don't care about your political affiliation. Mobs won't draw any lines because they can't draw any lines, because they are mobs. They don't want peace, justice, or reform. They want destruction, upheaval, and most of all, control over you, over others, and over our past, present, and future. In this country, no one is above the law, no matter how proper the coastal elites or mainstream media deem their cause. As elected officials, it is our responsibility to condemn these acts with passion, force, and moral clarity. It doesn't just happen in Wisconsin, it happens in California. It happens in the Speaker's District. Just a few short years ago, the Pope spoke from these chambers. As he left, the leadership stopped at St. Sarah and prayed together. There was a statue in San Francisco that the mob tore down. I'm not sure, but I have not seen any comments from the individual who represents that district. In fact, their so-called solutions, such as dismantling and defunding police, would only make the problem worse, especially for our vulnerable communities. By giving their left-wing allies a pass, Democrats are giving the mob more power, more license, and more ambition. That is a recipe not for justice, but for more chaos. Mr. Speaker, Abraham Lincoln knew riots, mob rule, and defunding the police present serious threats to the American way of life. As a young man, he warned that lawlessness in spirit quickly becomes lawlessness in practice. He knew if it was proper and you ignored it, it would become a practice. Today, we are witnessing the situation that Lincoln feared, a war of civil society that is quickly escalating. We must summon the courage to protect law-abiding citizens against lawlessness. Our choice is clear. civil society, or chaos. Those are our only options. Republicans know which side we stand on. We will stand up, hold the long line, and fight until the mob is stopped. Enough is enough. Today on this floor, 1 month ago, I thought we'd show the country that we are worthy of the office they let us serve in. We may be of different parties. I'm proud of mine. You see, I was not born into the Republican Party. I came from a party of Democrats. In my office, I keep portraits. I keep a portrait of Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican president. I love what he stood for. I love what he stood against. Malice towards none. I wonder what this nation would be had he not been assassinated. Would we ever have had Jim Crow laws or the KKK? Would we even be standing here today? But I think George Floyd would be. So would Pat Underwood. In my office, in my chambers, I have Frederick Douglass as my newest portrait. A man born into slavery, worked his way out, even though every reason to criticize this nation loved it. For its bruises, its sores, and all, because he believed in a more perfect union. Advisor to a president, and believing tomorrow would be better than today. Inside my conference room, I keep a very big portrait of Washington crossing the Delaware. If the mob was allowed in, they'd probably tear it down. You see, in that portrait, it's painted not by an American, but by an immigrant who lived here. Because America is more than a country. America is an idea about liberty and freedom. And he thought if he painted this painting, he'd inspire others to believe in the freedom that we stand for. He gets it historically incorrect. He puts Washington in a rowboat with 13 people, but he only shows you 12 faces. You look at Washington, he's in a ceremonial uniform with his hand on his chest, bigger than life. You'd think that man had never lost a battle, but history tells us he had never won one yet. You see, that was the night we surprised the Hessians with our first victory. But if you look at the portrait and see who's in it, you look at the second rower, he's a black American. The one next to him is Scottish. You come down in the red is a woman, in the very back is a Native American. I do not know if they were in the boat that night. But to this young immigrant, that's who he believed, having lived in America, would be there. To the back, you see this man, a farmer, with a hand across his face. It's the hand of the 13th person nobody sees. You see, to this young artist, he said, here we are, not even a nation, but an idea. An idea based upon that we are all equal. Having never won a battle, we're willing to risk everything, what people would say on our holiest of night of Christmas. We'll go to a challenge on a rough water and cross that we've never won before. Here's a hand, would you get in and join us? That's as true today as it was then. You see, in that portrait, they didn't say only one party to join. They wanted all. They didn't say one had all the ideas. They said we were collective. And they were willing to do things they hadn't done before. They knew they were not perfect, but they strived to become a more perfect union. I had hoped that that's what we would see today. Today, that will not be the answer, but that can also not be the end. I would hope both of us would rise up on both sides and ask us to go to conference. Let's not miss this window of opportunity to show that we are worthy of the cause we strive and the responsibility people give us. Let's not call each other names of murderers and others. Let's believe in the goodness of one another. And let's understand that we can solve this problem once and for all. With that, I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York is recognized.